Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Cavletics, an inside look into the athletics department here at Bossier Parish Community College. I'm your host, Charlie Cavell. Today I'm visiting with John Rennie, the athletics director here at BPCC. And John, welcome to the show. Thanks for visiting with us today and taking that time out of your busy schedule to visit with us. Appreciate it.
Excited to be here, Charlie.
Well, this is the final live episode of the fall semester. And so next week's show will be a replay of a previous show. Then it's the Thanksgiving break, and when the students return, they'll be headed right into final exams. So with this being our last live show of the semester, I thought we would do a recap of what has happened in Cavalier athletics this fall and preview the upcoming spring semester. With that being said, let's start, John, with cross country. Last year, BPCC brought cross country back, and they had an incredible season, particularly the men. They won the Region 14 title, competed in the NJCAA National Championship meet in Garden City, Kansas. The cross-country team had high expectations going into this season, but struggled to reach those same heights as they did in year one. Tell us, your thoughts, particularly on the men's cross-country team.
Yeah, I think if anything, that's really a testament to how great their season was last year, and it's a testament to how difficult it is at this level, the level that we're at, competing in the NJCAA and whatever sport it might be. To compete at the highest level and to compete for that regional championship, to go on to the national championship, whether it be cross country, basketball, baseball, softball, whatever it might be, you have to really be on the top of your game, so to speak. And our cross country kids, it wasn't that they had a bad year, it just wasn't as good as it was last year. They worked hard this year and working hard to kind of get ready for the spring, moving into track season and doing that.
All right, well, we talked about the men. What about the women's side of things?
Our women's, it's funny, and I think you can look at this almost in a lot of sports. It's difficult to get the numbers on the women's side as it is the men's side.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but Coach Brendan Nichols talked about that, particularly off camera a couple of weeks ago, that it's getting harder and harder and harder to keep female athletes participating unless they're participating at the highest level. Mm-hmm. To try to work their way up to that level.
Yeah, Coach Nichols and I had that same conversation, and even at the highest level sometimes you can look. I remember a few years ago, the University of Florida women's basketball had seven girls on their team that were healthy bodies at the time due to whatever reasons. A couple of girls may have left the team, they had injuries, whatever. But it's a little bit more difficult to keep the women engaged in those sports and working in those sports. The girls that do, they put a lot of effort into it, and we're very, very proud of all of our women athletes. And look, we're just with everything, and especially cross country, because it's just its second year back, looking to build on what we have and grow it and bring in more girls to that team this year. And I think it can be cyclical as well, as far as in this community, in this area. Some years it may be really good talent on the men's side, and then other years it may be really good talent on the women's side.
Well, the men's cross-country team has had a solid group, as we talked about. There's been a core of about 5 or 6 young men on that group the last couple of seasons. Can BPCC expect to get to that same level on the women's side? And so expound on that, because I want to follow up with a question about why maybe some of the reasoning behind keeping females in those sports.
Yeah, absolutely. We can get to that level, and I believe that we will. It kind of goes back to that my last comment, the previous question. It's a lot of times it's cyclical. Our cross country and track programs are kind of right now focused on local athletes. And there's some years that it's a bigger group of talent, stronger group of talent, and other years it's not. And so I think absolutely we'll get the women's program and the men's program up to the level that we want it to be at. We're all about growth in everything that we do, and we want to continue growth. I think we've we've seen tremendous growth in our athletic department over the last 5-6 years. And so we just want to continue that trajectory in all of our sports.
Well, going back to what we were talking about as regarding female athletes, I've talked to a number of different coaches, as you do as well, but I go back to what Coach Nichols told me was that, for every young man that is on our court or on our field, they think they're going to play not only at a higher level at a 4-year university, but every basketball player thinks they're going to the association. Every baseball player thinks they're going to play minor league and eventually Major League Baseball. According to her, she's like, girls don't think that way. Females don't think that way, that, unless they're playing at UConn or Mississippi State or Maryland and something like that in women's basketball, they're not thinking about playing in the WNBA or playing professional softball or what have you.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the opportunities for the women are not what they are for the men. Now, granted, I know there are some fast pitch softball leagues now, and we've got the WNBA that's created a lot of opportunities, and even overseas there's a lot of opportunities. But for whatever, you're exactly right. The guys come in, and it doesn't matter where they are on the team. They could be the last person coming off the bench, and they're still gonna hold on to that dream of playing in the NBA or playing in Major League Baseball or we don't have football, but for football players, play in the NFL. You talk to high school kids, and there's high school kids that aren't seeing the field, and they still have that dream also.
Well, yeah, because a lot of the attention that came to junior college sports over the last couple of years has been the Netflix series Last Chance U, whether they've been at East Mississippi Community College in beautiful Scuba, Mississippi, or up in Independence, Kansas. Listen to any of those players, and they all think they're going to play in the NFL.
It's the question of, and in fact, Alan Edwards, our trainer, and I were talking about this just last night. What role has ESPN played in sports overall at every level now? And it's on one hand, it's great because ESPN has given these athletes tremendous exposure. It's brought a lot of attention to sports. It's created a lot of opportunities. But then on the other hand, it's, everybody's about the highlight reel, and they see these, this kind of great life, and they, and not that there's anything wrong with striving for that, but I think sometimes girls are a little bit more realistic in that, look, I'm not going to play at that level. I'm not going to make it to that level. I'm going to work hard and do what I can. But, on the guy side, they've got those a little bit more opportunity, but even those opportunities are very, very limited.
Most of the cross-country team members will now begin preparing for the indoor and outdoor track seasons. This is the first year to have those two programs. What can you tell us about BPCC track and field?
We're working now to kind of schedule out a couple indoor meets, looking at the outdoor meets for the spring, and we've discussed this before with cross country as well. What I love about track and field at the junior college level is they'll be competing in meets at the 4-year schools with those 4-year athletes, and so it brings great exposure for our student athletes to these 4-year college coaches, and they're able to line up against runners or athletes that are running at top level in the country sometimes.
Yeah, that's really unique for cross country and track and field. I know baseball and softball, sometimes they'll play a 4-year school, like baseball went down to New Orleans and played UNO. Softball played Northwestern, but that's in fall ball. This isn't an actual real competitive on the line meet.
Yeah.
And that's what these are, and that's great for those runners.
It really is. Yep.
We're going to take a brief time out right now, but stay tuned because following the break we'll have more with BPCC Athletics Director John Rennie. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
From the time I was born, I was in a theatrical family. Now I'm dean of the division and pretty much the director of the theater aspects.
I love that people come to theater to experience the pain and tragedy and joy of other people's lives. I think that's kind of a beautiful thing. It's a release.
The whole experience of being on stage, it's scary, but I think it's kind of worth it because you get this adrenaline rush, you get all these emotions that you don't get to feel every day.
I haven't found a similar experience quite like it yet. It comes to a point where everything around me is real.
The theater is the one art form that encompasses all art forms. It's not about the final product other than the experience that happens when it happens.
As a student, you learn like every aspect of theater. You know, you learn costuming, you learn lighting, you know, you're building sets every day, and you're in makeup class, and you also, you know, take directing and acting. I mean, you do it all.
The hardest thing for some students to grasp is the language that they're dealing with, and you have to help them along. So when I find a student who has a lot of talent but needs some encouragement in other areas, that's the ones I really enjoy working with the most, I think.
Well, the faculty and staff at Bossier Parish Community College is absolutely fantastic. They wish they could keep you forever and they love you and all that, but they want you to spread your wings and fly, and they are seriously preparing you for that.
We're looking to increase our audience development, which will bring in more people to see how wonderful our students are and how many opportunities that we can give them. Also giving the experience to the students that they need so they can get out of here with their degree and get a job.
Welcome back to Cavletics. I'm Charlie Cavell, and we're visiting today with BPCC Athletics Director John Rennie. And before the break, we were discussing the BPCC cross-country and track and field programs. But John, before we dive into basketball, I'd like to talk a little bit about what's going on with BPCC baseball and softball. The fall ball season or seasons are nearly complete. Tell us about how the fall has gone for both Coach Bobby Gillum and the Caveliers baseball team, as well as Coach Amanda Nordberg and the BPCC softball team.
Yeah, it's been a very, I would say, very successful fall season for both of those teams. As you mentioned earlier, baseball went down and played against UNO. Our softball program has played against a number of Division I schools, including Northwestern State, Stephen F. Austin, and both of those programs have either gotten wins against some Division I programs or been very, very competitive, which is great for our student athletes because they're out there competing against those Division I athletes in front of those Division I coaches. I know if I were a Division I coach at a four-year school, I would eat up if I was playing a junior college and had these athletes that were shining and competing, I mean, straight up head-to-head with my athletes, then that's prime recruiting material right there.
Well, yeah, because, I mean, look at it. Baseball played against UNO. Former Cavalier was a big standout on our team last year, Hudson Laborde. Well, he's playing for the Privateers. And so, I mean, yeah, that's really good exposure for those for all of those young men.
Yeah, it's really going to be fun to watch what transpires out of this fall ball season for some of our baseball and softball student athletes, because there's a few of them that are getting quite a bit of attention from some pretty strong,
Ruby
solid
Butler,
programs.
Shortstop.
Yeah.
I know Louisiana Tech's after Maryland is hard on her. You know, former Louisiana Tech coach Montgomery just went up to the University of Maryland, and you know, for a young lady who's from Snohomish, Washington, to make her way from the from the West Coast to nearly the Gulf Coast, not quite, but nearby. Now to possibly going to the East Coast. I mean, what a journey and what a trip for Ruby. But yes, we have a lot of young baseball players too, guys that are being looked at heavy, and you know, a guy like Bobby Lotta, who I know UL Lafayette, who has a new head coach, and Matt Deggs, you know, after the sudden passing of Tony Robichaux last year. But others, you know, Dylan Collins, I know Nickel State has been all over him, and I mean many. So I mean, it's a big deal for when they can play, as you said, in front of those four-year schools.
It is, and it brings kind of to light to me, what is one of the great things about junior college athletics is, obviously as a former coach, one of the things that I loved is not only did I get to recruit athletes, but I got to be a part of my student athletes, my players being recruited as well. So you got to kind of be on both ends of it. And for us, even just as administrators, getting to watch that process and see that for these student athletes, that even in the short 2 years that we may have them, the development in those 2 years is really just fun to watch.
Well, yeah, and I mean, when you go to a game like last year, I went to Louisiana Tech and saw one of BPCC's former pitchers pitching for Old Dominion, you know, and wow, you know, it really is, you know, it's just one of those, it was one of those eye-opening type moments to see a former Cavalier pitching against Louisiana Tech, you know, for Old Dominion. It was great. You know, back to baseball, softball, with those good players and with those good recruiting classes, bringing in those good players, and baseball with so many of those guys returning, what are the expectations for those programs come the spring?
Well, I think for both of those programs, obviously a repeat of going to the Region 14 tournament, and then just taking that next step. You know, I think both Coach Amanda and Coach Bobby have done an amazing job of not just bringing talent in, but grooming that talent and putting that talent together and putting them in the right places, and just making things work, and in addition to on the field, off the field as well, taking care of business in the classroom, getting things done academically. So I think for both of those programs, the spring semester, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch them, and to watch, you know, we've got the fall ball season behind us, but spring is for real, and so to watch what they, you know, how they perform and what they do for real, and I think realistically, we can expect big things out of both of those programs this spring.
Well, you know, Coach Amanda Norberg Hamilton and her Lady Cavaliers have won 40-plus games for 3 straight years. And with the assemblage of talent that she has, both returning as well as the newcomers that she's brought in, you know, the expectations are, you know, making it to the national tournament, I think, realistically. And for Coach Bobby Gillum and his Cavaliers, you know, not just making the tournament, but making noise in the tournament and possibly getting to the national tournament, because they have a lot of talent now. You know, Region 14 baseball is an absolute grind. I mean, as it is in softball, and I'm not discounting, but when you play 30 conference games and 30, you know, and 10 series, and you're seeing a team, an opponent 6 times, that's rough. That's a haul. I mean, that's almost minor league baseball like in the sense of playing that many games against common opponents. You know, we talked about baseball and the talent level that they brought in. Now let's turn our attention to basketball. Basketball season has tipped off, and most of our viewers might remember that Coach John Rennie started the women's basketball program here at BPCC. Last year was the first year that you weren't patrolling the sidelines and harassing officials. How difficult personally was it for you to go from being a coach to now just being an administrator to being a spectator up in the stands? Yeah,
it's interesting. In fact, at our first women's game the other night, I joked with a couple of the referees. I said, "Do y'all miss me yet?" And, I do miss the going up and down the sidelines. I miss the games. In fact, Yolanda Cooper was at that game. Yolanda was my assistant coach when we started the program, and she and I kind of reminisced during the game on Tuesday and talked about things we missed and things we didn't miss. And it's funny, I actually kind of missed some of the road trips. You know, getting on a bus and driving for 7 hours sometimes doesn't sound like a lot of fun, but the interesting thing for me was that was my rest time. You know, I would kind of sleep and get some rest and just enjoy being with the girls and the team.
What are you talking about? You don't get any rest now that you're the AD and have nothing to worry about?
Yeah, well,
worry about
now, then I was AD and coaching, so there was definitely no rest time. But I miss teaching the game. You know, I mean, that's probably the thing that I miss the most is just teaching the game. But I'm blessed and privileged and honored to do what I do as athletic director, and to be able to watch it's also fun just to be able to spectator and sit there.
I can definitely understand that. Having coached baseball and football a little bit, but more baseball than anything. The two things that I miss is being around the game on a daily basis, but also being around the players and other coaches and the relationships that you build with young men and other peers in the business. That's probably the biggest thing I miss.
Yeah, it's in fact, right before we came over to film the show, I was talking to Miss Tina Barth, who works in our office, and I told her, I said, yeah, I've got former players now that are having babies or starting businesses, and so it's fun to watch that development, and it is. You miss that camaraderie. I mean, I think that's most people that go into coaching, that's a big reason why they do, because team was so big a part of their life, whatever team it was, and just a chance to be around the game, get back to the game, and have that sense of camaraderie that comes with a team.
Coach Brenda Nichols and her Lady Cavaliers had a rough opener on Tuesday night, falling 82-40